So some of the scans, for example, the radar, we're getting data down to about 30 feet, and it's showing subterranean structures and cavities. So there's a possibility that some of these rooms, or you can call it cages or whatever, they're not filled in yet with mud and material, but they're still open spaces.
The radar pulse shot deep into the frozen earth. On the screen, a perfect, unnatural right angle appeared. Then another, and another. Scientists stared in disbelief. They were scanning a mysterious 500-foot-long formation in Turkey long rumored to be Noah's Ark. But the thing nobody tells you is that this was always dismissed as a natural rock.
Researchers in Turkey now claim they found indisputable evidence that the story of Noah's Ark was not a cautionary tale about the consequences of forsaking God, but a verifiable historical event.
Now, stunning new evidence from inside the structure, including strange organic materials and bizarre chemical signatures, has left the scientific world in shock. What they found could prove the ancient legend is terrifyingly real. What the Earth confessed. High in the remote mountains of eastern Turkey, a team of scientists has been working in near total secrecy. They are investigating a site that has been the subject of intense debate for over half a century. It's a massive boat-shaped formation nestled just miles from Mount Ararat, and many have long claimed it to be the final resting place of Noah's Ark.
It was noticed because of the ship's shape. And this is the only shape people saw out here in 1959 that got the world interested.
For decades, mainstream science dismissed it as a simple, interesting geological anomaly, a trick of the light, a natural rock formation. But now that is all about to change. You see, a new joint project involving researchers from Istanbul Technical University, Agri Ibrahim Sesi University, and Andrews University in the United States decided to look again. This time, they weren't just taking pictures from afar, they brought cutting-edge technology to find out what was inside the mound. And what they found is, to put it mildly, staggering. The team, led by scientists like Professor Farouk Kaya and Andrew Jones, didn't just rely on scans. They went hands-on. They began drilling, pulling core samples from deep within the mysterious boat-shaped structure. They wanted to compare the material inside the formation to the soil outside of it. The thing nobody tells you about archaeology is that sometimes the biggest discoveries aren't gold statues, but microscopic traces left behind in the dirt. When the lab results came back, the research tent fell silent. The soil from inside the formation contained almost 3 times the organic matter as the surrounding earth. Let that sink in. This wasn't just a little difference, it was a massive chemical spike. But here's the kicker. The samples were also loaded with potassium.
Soil samples, you found potassium in the soil, which indicates that wood was there.
Why does that matter? Because potassium is a key element released during the decomposition of wood. Professor Kaya, in an interview with the Jerusalem Post, stated the facts plainly. The results indicated the deposition of decayed wood or other organic materials consistent with the preservation of a large ancient structure within a mud flow. But it gets even more unbelievable. The team also uncovered clay-like substances, marine deposits, and even the tiny remnants of seafood. This is stunning. They found evidence of sea life on a mountaintop, miles from any ocean. As lead scientist Andrew Jones explained to Fox News Digital, these findings support the scenario of an extreme catastrophe, a time when this entire region was once submerged underwater. And the dating? The radiocarbon dating of the materials places them in a range between 3,500 and 5,000 years ago. This timeline is an exact match for the biblical catastrophe of the Great Flood. This new evidence has sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The New York Post ran the headline, "New evidence at Darupanar Formation supports myth of Noah's Ark." NDTV and Fox News ran extensive reports. What was once dismissed as a fringe theory is now backed by hard chemical data. The Earth itself seems to be confessing that something enormous, something organic, and something ancient is buried just beneath the surface. It's no longer a question of if something is down there. The only question now is, what is it? What the scientists found has changed the game. But this bombshell in the soil is only the latest piece of a puzzle that began over 50 years ago with a single chilling photograph. But how did this all start? The chemical evidence is new, but the mystery is ancient. Turkey's most bizarre landmark. This entire incredible story kicks off back in the 1950s. A Turkish army captain named İlhan Darupınar was on a routine aerial mapping mission flying over the remote snow-capped mountains of eastern Turkey. As he looked down, he spotted something that made his blood run cold. There, etched into the earth, was a perfect, unmistakable outline. It was the shape of a massive ship. This wasn't some vague, it kind of looks like a boat shape. It was blatantly obvious. A streamlined hull, a pointed bow, and a rounded stern. It appeared to be aground, frozen in time on the side of a mountain. The captain snapped a photograph, and when it was developed, it ignited a firestorm of curiosity. The photo was eventually published in Life magazine, and the world got its first glimpse of what would come to be known as the Darupınar site. You see, what many overlooked at the time was the sheer scale of this thing. Researchers, explorers, and believers began making the difficult trek to the site. What they found was mind-boggling. They measured the formation.
And then when you look at the size of it, it is exactly 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. That's what Moses wrote in the book of Genesis.
Its length? 538 feet. Why is that number so important? Because the ancient texts describing Noah's Ark give a very specific measurement. The book of Genesis says the ark was 300 cubits long. A cubit is an ancient measure, the length from an elbow to the tip of the middle finger. While the exact length is debated, the most common scholarly consensus for a royal cubit is around 20.4 inches. 300 cubits would be just over 500 feet. The match was and is incredible. This wasn't just a small boat, this was a vessel longer than a football field and a half, with dimensions that perfectly resonated with the ancient narrative. For years, the site gained international attention. The BBC sent film crews. National Geographic photographers hiked the steep slopes. But to be fair, early expeditions were inconclusive. Many people are crazy about the idea, but the scientific consensus quickly landed on a natural explanation. Geologists proposed that the shape was something called a syncline, a natural downward fold in the rock layers caused by the surrounding mud flows and erosion. They argued that the hull was just a trick of shadow and soil, a coincidence. And for decades, that's where the story stalled. The Darupınar Formation became a piece of fringe history, a curiosity for tourists and believers, but not a serious subject for mainstream science. But not all things are what they seem. While the world moved on, a handful of dedicated researchers, both Turkish and American, just couldn't let it go. The dimensions were too perfect. The location right in the mountains of Ararat mentioned in the Bible was too precise. They believed the natural explanation was just too simple. They were convinced that if they could only see inside it, they would find the truth. They just needed the right technology, and in the 21st century, they finally got it. The shape was perfect. The size was perfect. But could they prove it was man-made? Unveiling the man-made structure. This is where the story goes from intriguing to truly unbelievable. The Noah's Ark Scans team didn't just bring drills, they brought technology so advanced it can see through solid earth. They used two key methods, ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography. Let's break that down. The thing nobody tells you about GPR is that it's like a high-tech fish finder for the ground. It sends radio waves deep into the soil and listens for the echo. When those waves hit something, a rock, a void, or say a piece of petrified wood, they bounce back. By reading those echoes, scientists can create a ghostly chart of what's hidden below. ERT, on the other hand, shoots electrical currents into the ground to map different materials.
Ultimately, we hope to find a ship buried below the ground. This would include rooms, floors, that would match the biblical account. The Bible talks about having 3 decks and rooms for the animals. And so that's what we hope to find below the ground there.
As the team began their first scans, the operators stared at their screens in absolute amazement. What they saw was not the chaotic, jumbled mess of rock and soil that you would expect from a natural formation like a mud flow. Instead, the scans revealed clean, parallel lines. They found well-defined structures. And most shocking of all, they found perfect right angles. Nature doesn't build in right angles. Humans do. One of the operators told Fox News Digital that the structures looked nothing like what you'd expect from a natural formation. The data was painting a picture of something massive and artificial. The scans identified what appears to be a long central corridor running approximately 234 feet. Flanking this corridor were clear anomalies that looked exactly like side rooms or compartments. But that was just the GPR. The resistivity scans were even more teasing. These more sophisticated tests, led by New Zealand engineer John Larson, were designed to map the entire hull of the formation. The findings were stunning. The scans showed the shape stretching more than 40 feet beneath the surface. They identified what looked like massive ribs arching under the ground, just like the ribs used to support the hull of a massive ancient ship. And then they found the decks. The scans clearly showed 3 separate distinct layers or deck-like formations, one on top of the other. The data even suggested a central stairway and landings, all consistent with the ARK's biblical design. John Larson stated it flatly. This is not a random pile of rock. It's a structure that was built, not one that was formed randomly. The media, of course, exploded. NDTV ran a report titled, "Noah's Ark Discovered. Radar Scans Reveal Boat-Shaped Structure in Turkey." The Christian Broadcasting Network spoke with Andrew Jones, who confirmed finding tunnel-shaped cavities, deck-like formations, and corridors. He said, "It's just what you'd want to find if you were looking for a man-made boat." The team even found evidence of burst hull sections, cracks in the structure that suggest the vessel ran aground, sliding down the mountain slope before colliding with a massive rock outcropping. They now had a complete 3-dimensional blueprint of a massive, 3-decked, ribbed vessel, buried under thousands of years of mud in the exact spot with the exact dimensions of Noah's Ark. The evidence seems overwhelming, so why doesn't every scientist on Earth agree? History's greatest cover-up? With all this evidence, the perfect shape, the biblical dimensions, the shocking soil samples, and the high-tech scans showing decks and ribs, you would think the case is closed. But as with any discovery this big, there's a huge debate.
This is the limestone structure that they believe this boat got impaled on as it came down the mudslide. And then you can kind of see the surrounding topography. You almost can kind of visually see the mudslide coming down the hill here.
For years, the mainstream geological consensus has been firm. Darupanar is a natural formation. They argue that mudflows can be powerful and strange, creating shapes that mimic man-made objects. They say the parallel lines are just natural rock layers or strata. They dismiss the GPR data as noise and misinterpretation. They argue that the entire thing is just a remarkable coincidence, a geological face on Mars that people are desperate to believe in. But this is where the new evidence becomes so critical. This is where the debunkers get debunked. You see, the "it's just a rock" theory can't explain the new findings. A natural mudflow does not create a chemical signature of rotting wood. A natural syncline does not contain 3 times the organic matter as the soil right next to it. A simple rock formation does not contain marine deposits and seafood remnants on a mountaintop. The soil samples are the key. They are the undeniable proof that something else is there. Something that was once alive, something made of wood, and something that was caught in a massive flood. When you take all the evidence together, the natural formation theory starts to fall apart. First, there's the shape. A 538-foot-long, perfectly symmetrical ship. Second, there's the size. A near-perfect match for the 300-cubit dimensions from the Book of Genesis. Third, there's the technology. GPR and ERT scans that reveal an internal man-made structure with decks, rooms, and a hull. And fourth, the smoking gun, the chemical evidence. Soil from inside the structure that is loaded with organic matter and potassium, the clear fingerprints of a massive decomposed wooden vessel. The researchers on the ground, like Professor Kaya, are cautious. They are scientists, after all. He has stated that with the dating, it is impossible to claim the ship is here. We have to work for a long time to open this. But the excitement is impossible to hide. The evidence suggests, at the very least, that the ancient narrative had some basis in a real historical event. The implications are world-changing. This is no longer just a story. It's an active archaeological site, a scientific mystery backed by data. What was once a legend is now a tangible, measurable, and scannable thing buried in the Turkish mountains. The world is now holding its breath, waiting for the next step. As the scientists continue their work, we are left to wonder, what will they find when they finally physically dig inside? The evidence is piling up, but if this really is the Ark, what else has history been hiding? Tell us what you believe below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.